a deputy has been summoned by U.S. officials to explain some of President Duterte's remarks about senior U.S. officials. My question is, should candidate Trump also be summoned by Philippine officials for comments he has made?
Well, Trump has not yet been elected, and I don't think he will be elected as President of the United States. But I was asked earlier about the comment, and I said to Jim, of course, I don't want to be criticizing our president, but I just felt that it was an inappropriate comment. I don't know what my deputy, who is now the charge in Washington, had to say when he was summoned by the State Department, but I'm glad I'm not the Philippine ambassador to the U.S.
Yes. We have a question right here. Please state your name and stand.
Hi, Ambassador. I'm Sam Pimentel from ADCO Blue. Just out of curiosity, I guess. So we haven't received any submarines from the U.S. or other countries. And also, do we really have, as a sovereign country, do we have a sovereign wealth fund yet?
As far as I know, there's no sovereign wealth fund, but that has been suggested. I know some people have said that. When you look at the foreign reserves of our country, which are at record level, $85 billion, I think maybe the central bank would be willing to consider that, because when you look at the kind of investments that are available now, very low yields. So perhaps putting some funds in a sovereign fund that can probably look beyond the investments that are normally made by the BSP might be one possibility. No?
Okay. Please, the next question. Please stand and state your name.
Good morning, Ambassador.
Morning.
Joe. I'm just wondering now, since most of us here are CEOs and presidents of organizations, what do we expect now that it seems that our president is not really a fan of the U.S.? So what do you expect now from U.S. investments? What do you expect now from businessmen coming in here to invest for us?
Well, first, we have to look at the 10-point economic program, and I have to say that it is a very good economic program for as long as they implement that properly. And that's what I think American businessmen will be looking at. The fact that the Philippine economy continues to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world today, definitely they are looking if they're not yet here, but into the possibility of establishing operation. I think that's one area that we should really see greater American involvement. When you look at it, we have 600 American firms here. In Singapore, they have 3,500 American firms operating. In Singapore, they have U.S. investments is roughly about $60 billion. In the Philippines, they have about $5 billion. ASEAN as a whole is roughly about $190 billion. When you look at the U.S. investment in ASEAN, it's bigger than their investments in China, Hong Kong, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia combined. So ASEAN really gets a lot of it. Unfortunately, the Philippines is not getting a very large percentage of that, and that's what we have to address. When I ask my friends in the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, in fact, there's a business mission coming today. Excuse me. We will be meeting with them tomorrow. I said, why is it that U.S. businesses not investing in the Philippines more? In other words, because many of the American businesses that have come here have done very well. Look at Procter & Gamble, IBM, Citibank. These companies have been here for decades, and they have done very well. I think for a long time, unfortunately, corruption was a major issue against the Philippines. During the time of Marcos, during the time of President Arroyo. Those, that issue kept coming up. But they all agreed that during the time of President Aquino, that the Philippines had been transformed. They believed in his integrity and the fact that he was serious about fighting corruption. We can't say that we've eliminated corruption, but certainly, to a large degree, we have been able to eliminate corruption in many of these departments and agencies of government. One example is Department of Public Works. And many times, President Aquino would point to Secretary Singson, who did so much in terms of eliminating corruption in the Department of Public Works, which used to be one of the most corrupt agencies or departments in the past. So, if I look at the figures, again, we've seen an increasing level of investment by American firms. And just one last thing. When I met with the senior vice president of US, for Asia, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, she told me shortly after I arrived, maybe a few months after I was there, she said, Mr. Ambassador, I've been covering Asia for over the past 20 years. It's unfortunate that the Philippines has fallen behind its neighbors. And I said, Tammy Overby, just give us a few years and we'll show you that we're going to change that. Last March, when she came to see me, and in fact, she said, Mr. Ambassador, I am very impressed with what the Philippines has done. We have to give President Aquino credit and his cabinet for the transformation of the Philippine economy. And I'll tell you that no less than the IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, lauded the Philippines for all the reforms. And in fact, she said it was only the Philippines that they were upgrading their economic forecast because they were downgrading the economic forecast for other countries. The World Bank has come out with very good comments about the Philippines. So I'm sure that the Americans will continue to look at the Philippines very seriously for both trade and investments. I think one comment of the president is not going to, impel them to just drop the Philippines. Tremendous opportunities for American firms in the Philippines.
Thank you, Ambassador. And just to follow up that question, should we, we are looking at really wanted that the U.S. would come in here, invest for us. They were really our friends and our allies. And we were wondering, they have more investments than other ASEAN countries in the Philippines. And we understand that the former President Aquino did a lot of positive responses from all over the world. How is it now that we have a president that is not so friendly with the U.S. would affect? Should we worry that the momentum would impede, or should we be optimistic that the growth of the economy would continue?
I feel more optimistic, and as I said, we have to look at that 10-point economic agenda, and for as long that that is properly implemented, I think we will continue to receive and attract U.S. investments, and not only U.S. investment, but investments from all over the world, because the Philippines has proven to be quite resilient even when it comes to natural disasters. We have also proven capable of overcoming the challenges that we have faced over the last 20, 25 years. You should listen to the talks of Dr. Villegas whenever he goes around the U.S. He talks about the reforms that have taken place over the last 25 years. It's not just the 5 years or 6 years under the Aquino administration. And this is why he's very bullish. Dr. Villegas is talking about economic growth of 7 to 10%. And I recall he was saying, regardless of who is in Malacanang, we will at least make 6%. And if we have a good president, we're going to do 7 to 10%. And so you have to listen to what Dr. Villegas has to say. He's the economist, I'm not.
Good morning, Ambassador. I'm Francis from Jones Lang Lasal, Philippines. First of all, thank you for your work for the country. And
Thank you.
I would like to sort of dive deep into that experience because during your vast experience in, well, another country, and in a country that also has a diverse culture of drugs, what do you think about the situation of drugs and the war on it that the current administration has waged upon? So, what are
Well,
your thoughts on it?
Thank you. Thank you, Francis, for that question. I think it's a very important battle that we have to undertake because the drug menace has really become so huge. However, I feel, though, that the rule of law must be upheld. Due process must be given to each individual who is accused of being a drug lord, a drug pusher, or whatever. And frankly, I cannot agree with the extrajudicial killings that are taking place every day. It is unfortunate. While I know that we have to go after the violators of our drug laws, they are still human beings. They have to be accorded due process. And I hope the administration does that. I think Vice President Leni Robredo has said that herself in her talk in the U.S. when she addressed a large group of Filipino Americans in the U.S.
Okay, that was a very good question. Can I lead into a personal question for the ambassador? I know that you were offered an extension to stay on as ambassador under the current administration, but declined. Many of us hoped that you would have provided, because he's, an elegant, polished senior person and could have provided, some elegance and polished and assistance to the current administration, who are doing many good things, although but you declined. Can you talk about that?
Well, first, I did not expect the offer from President Duterte. When we were in Davao, I brought the U.S. Philippine Society board members. I introduced them to the President, although some of them are known to him, Ambassador John Negroponte, Ambassador Tom Hubbard. They met him in Davao when he was mayor of Davao. I did not, frankly, expect the offer. At first, I thought he was just being very polite, but he repeated it a number of times, and I said, well, I had to discuss it with my wife, my family. And after doing that, I think we came to a decision that I had done my share, and I thanked the President for his confidence, and I politely declined, and I said that my family would prefer that I spent more time, particularly with my grandchildren. They're growing up very fast, and I've hardly had time with them. So that's why I turned down the offer. No?
Okay. Please, next question.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Your Honorable Ambassador Cuisia. And thank you again for the service that you have done for our country. I'd like to ask, since you mentioned about the 10-point agenda, if we are on track and we implement that properly, how far are we from achieving first world status in the world?
Maybe you should ask Dr. Villegas that. He's the economist. It's going to take some time because I've heard him say that we will take another 10, 15, maybe even 20 years for us to be able to substantially reduce our poverty levels. Right now, we're at about 24% of our population. And Dr. Villegas was saying in his trips that we have to be generating a GDP growth rate of 7, 8% for at least, say, 10, 15, or 20 years like China to be able to substantially reduce our poverty incidence and eventually become a first world country. And I agree with his comments. So it's going to take some more time. So that's why it's important that we are able to sustain the economic growth that we have seen and do even better. But, if we achieve a long-term peace in Mindanao, I am very confident we can achieve 7, 8, even 9% because there are tremendous opportunities for not just for Philippine business, but also for American business as well as business from other countries, because Mindanao has tremendous economic potential.
Could I just say something? This could be a continuation of the road shows that Ambassador Cuisia and a group did in the United States, and you are more important than those people who are in the United States. So just to give you the reason why, whatever your reservations about the Duterte administration may be, the economy is doing very well. First of all, he will not be able to do anything that will remove, number one, $28 billion worth of remittances from overseas workers. So that's our first engine of growth. And that's why I used to say before the election, even if we elected Vice Ganda for president, that growth will continue. The second source of growth that cannot be affected by Duterte, whatever his limitations may be, would be the industry to which many of you belong. $22 billion worth of BPO, KPO earnings, growing at 18% every year. Again, that's going to continue. And in fact, that's the biggest exposure that we have to the United States. As you very well know, 80% of that market is the US. And whatever Duterte may say about US officials, I don't think the American BPO enterprises will change their mind about being here. Now, in the 10-point agenda, the items that will add 2 to 3% percentage points are, number one, the implementation of all those private-public partnership projects that were not implemented under the Aquino administration. And again, that, I'm sure, will happen. If there's one thing we admire in Duterte is decisiveness. And so that will happen. You can be sure that out of the 52 PPPs that were announced by President Aquino, 6 to 8 were implemented. I'm sure that 17 will be implemented by next year. And the other one, and I'm very glad Ambassador Cuisia mentioned Mindanao, is a tremendous increase in agricultural productivity, especially in Mindanao. That's one of the 10-point agenda. Those are the two additional sources of growth, in addition to remittances and BPO, that will be present under the Duterte administration. And so that's why you can be very confident that we will have an economy that will be the fastest growing economy in Asia in the next 6 years. No? So that's the only thing I can say.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Villegas.
And, well, if I can ask one question that I'm excited to ask, but Southeast Asia and China, now that you're no longer a private citizen, as you mentioned, what can you tell us about that? Are they being a bunch of schoolyard bullies, or do they have a credible case?
Well, we are very happy that we got that favorable ruling from the arbitral tribunal. And I said that I felt that our Secretary of Foreign Affairs had not been as firm as he should have been in insisting that the joint communique make a reference to that arbitral rule, because it's just right. And the other countries, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, they all felt that there should be a reference. Obviously, Laos and Cambodia were not happy about that. But unfortunately, it was the Philippine Secretary of Foreign Affairs who withdrew the petition, I think, after he tried the first time, but then when he saw the opposition, he withdrew. Now, I said in the case of Secretary De Rosario, in the Cambodia meeting of foreign ministers, he insisted that there be a to the South China Sea. Yeah, eventually there was no statement. For the first time in, 45 years that there was no joint statement. So is that going to deter us from saying, no, we have to insist on what is right? We won a ruling in the arbitral tribunal. We fought so hard for that. And for so many years, we've been bullied, we've been humiliated, our fishermen have been battered, their fishing boats have been battered. And now, why are we going to just throw that away? In fact, China says, before we negotiate with the Philippines, we want you to set aside the ruling. Do they think that we're morons, that we are, just going to say, forget about it, and after all the hard work, after all the money we spent, and they just want to say, forget about the ruling? I mean, no, I said, we don't want to flaunt. We don't want to flaunt the victory. We don't want to taunt China. No, we want them to treat us with respect. It is, the tribunal just indicates what we are entitled to under UNCLOS, what they are entitled to themselves, and what the other countries are entitled to. So that's what we are saying. We have to uphold the rule of law. We have to respect international law. And China, if it wants to be a major power, a superpower eventually, that they too must also respect the rule of law and respect international law in the settlement of maritime disputes. So that's really my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. And the joint statement, okay, we have a question right here from Eric Manuel.
Hi, thank you, Ambassador. Eric Manuel, balikbayan after 25 years.
Yeah.
What's the most critical skill needed, you think, for future ambassadors, especially now and with the way the world is?
Well, one is he has to be a listener, and that's how I learned a lot, by listening to people, including my people in the embassy, because again, I recognize I'm not a diplomat. I had to learn from my colleagues in the embassy. I learned a lot from the ASEAN ambassadors, the more seasoned diplomats like the Japanese ambassador, the Australian ambassador, who became very good friends. The Australian ambassador was former Foreign Minister Kim Bisley. The Japanese ambassador Ken Sasai was a very senior diplomat in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign. So I learned a lot from these very seasoned diplomats. So of course, listening. But at the same time, there comes a time when you also have to be willing to speak out, even though, what you might say may not be pleasing, although of course you have to be very diplomatic about it. Since I'm a private citizen now, as I told Richard, I don't have to be diplomatic anymore, so I can speak out my views as I see them, So I think it's important also to be able to have a good judgment, because there are times that it's best not to say anything as a diplomat. And I've seen occasions like that during my 5 years and 3 months term. So judgment is very important. And at the end of the day, I recognize that without the support of my colleagues, not just in the embassy, the consulates general, and the Department of Foreign Affairs, as well as the other agencies of government, I would not have been able to accomplish the things that I mentioned earlier. It was a team effort. It was not just my effort. So when I received the Order of Sikatuna Award, I did say, in fact, that award does not belong to me alone, but to all my colleagues in the embassy, the Consulate General, DFA, and the other agencies of government.
Very good. We have a question right here. Joby?
Hi, good morning, Ambassador. Hypothetically, if you're given an extended term to be U.S. Ambassador, with the blessing of the wife, of course, what would be your 3 priorities programs that you will continue?
Well, definitely one I did not mention was, very important, is the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Unfortunately, the Philippines is not a member, and frankly, I don't understand why we did not indicate our willingness to be a member of TPP. Because many times, not just my American friends, but others would tell me, if Vietnam can do it, we can't understand why the Philippines cannot. I think our trade ministers or trade secretaries, trade and industry said, we're probably a bit more cautious, maybe timid, to commit the country to be a member of TPP. And because of that, there is now a danger that the Philippines will lose the garments business to Vietnam and Malaysia, which are members of TPP. So if I had agreed to separate, I would have really focused my efforts on trying to get our government to really push for the Philippines to be a member as early as possible, gain early accession in the second batch. A number of countries have already expressed their interest. South Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, and of course the Philippines, we've also expressed. But we need to get our industries ready for that, and we have to be ready to gain accession. The biggest challenge, of course, is that the Constitution will have to be amended, and right now, in fact, they're talking about amending the Constitution to remove the economic provisions that restrict foreign ownership, because unless we do that, we're going to encounter a problem in terms of being eligible because of the level playing field principle of TPP. Now, we're also waiting to see, will the US Congress approve or ratify TPP? We'll find that out in a few months, probably after the elections, because both candidates have expressed opposition. It's going to be, I think, a big mistake if the US does not push through with it. But I hope they do. And the next thing will be for us to work on that. The other programs that I think we will, of course, the EDCA, the implementation of EDCA is very critical. So the Philippine government must work together with EDCA, with the Defense Department, both the US and the Philippines working together on the armed forces to try to get that implemented as early as possible. Of course, the MCC second compact is also very critical because if we can come to an agreement with MCC, we will be receiving significant assistance for the projects that will be part of that second compact. The second compact, I understand that the decision will probably come about the fall of next year, so roughly the last quarter of 2017. So those are three of the, I think, major programs that we would have to really push. No.
Okay. Maybe if I could ask one more question about Southeast Asia. Some people came and said an alternative to what seems to me like the common sense approach to dealing with China. What they said was, rather than trying to potentially create a conflict or something, is now that Philippines has the UN ruling, the whole world looks at China as a bit ridiculous and petty and even like bullies. So why would just allow China to do what they do and then hopefully to attract Chinese investment? Because Philippines missed out in some ways, some have said, on Chinese investment because of this situation. Yeah, do you think that's or is that ridiculous?
Well, I think we need to explore a compromise that would not require us to give up our sovereignty over our exclusive economic zones. The reason why our diplomatic efforts failed, we've had over 50 meetings with China. Every meeting that we would have, they would always start by saying, we have indisputable sovereignty over the South China Sea, period. That's the end of the meeting because we're not willing to accept that. So, now that the ruling has been made clear that we have an exclusive economic zone that's been delineated under the UNCLOS, we expect China to respect that. They talk about joint development, but joint development in this disputed, can we tell them, okay, we'll have joint development in your area. If you agree, then fine, we'll have both, right? But no, it's joint development only in our area. Why should we accept that? So I am just saying that there should be a way of finding a compromise that's acceptable to both parties. Unfortunately, China has been very unreasonable in the past. Hopefully, with this ruling, maybe over time they may change, they may be more reasonable. But I am not against joint development for as long as it is fair and equitable. One attempt what was done by Manny Pangilinan's group, Forum. And again, it was clearly one-sided. Just give you an example. What kind of law did they want if there is a dispute among partners? They said Hong Kong law. Hong Kong is a part of China. How can we accept Hong Kong law? We were suggesting either UK law or Singapore law. They refused. They wanted Hong Kong law. So at the end of the day, that joint development did not push through. At that time, we said, okay, we will set aside sovereignty issues, not talk about purely commercial transaction. CNOOC was involved, the Chinese state-owned oil company, and Forum here. Forum, as you know, is Manny Pangilinan, Ricky Rason, and a UK firm. So they tried. But when our lawyers who were handling our case saw the agreement, it's so one-sided. We can't agree to that. I mean, it's not good for the Philippine government to agree. So Manny respected that decision. They did not push through with the project.
Okay, interesting. Oh, we have another question here, please.
Hi, good morning, Ambassador. Thank you so much for your service. Just a question about what your perspective is, because if you look at what's happening all over the world, in countries, we saw it just in Thailand this week, it's happened in Austria, the United States is gravitating towards it, and even here, there seems to be sort of a rejection of neoliberalism and of movement towards authoritarianism. Why do you think this is happening in so many countries around the world? Are these just isolated cases, or do you think that there's a shift towards something that maybe is beyond the control of individual countries?
Perhaps it's a disappointment with in the U.S., for example. There's so much gridlock in Congress. A lot of the programs that were being pushed by either party did not, materialize because of the gridlock between the Republicans and the Democrats. No? Could that be solved? Whoever comes out as president of the United States, whether Secretary Clinton or Donald Trump, I hope not Donald Trump, but anyway, if that will be able to precisely reach out to the other party to work together on some very important programs. In the case of TPP, for example, I think that if she were to be elected, Secretary Clinton would probably find ways of maybe finding some amendments to the agreement that would still be acceptable to the other countries, that would satisfy her constituents and enable them to push through with the TPP. Because I think that that's a very good agreement, and this is why I am for joining that agreement eventually. So whoever is the president will just have to reach out. For example, in terms of reducing the budgetary deficits, unfortunately, the deficits have grown so much. The U.S. debt has also grown so much. And, again, they have to come to an agreement how to tackle that problem, which has been, persisting for some time. So I guess, shift to authority, I think it is the fact that a lot of the people are very dissatisfied with the current situation. No?
Okay. Last question. I know I'm being motioned, but I just can't help myself to ask. In going back to the outsourcing BPO industry years ago, when AIG decided to move some of their back office core work, at the time this was seen as outrageous because nobody had done this. And I remember for years and years afterwards, every presentation that we all used always had AIG, and it stood out because it was the only one doing real high-value core work. Many good call center operations, at the time, but AIG really stood out. Now, at the time, this was, it was so outrageous. It was shortly after, there was a change in government and there was some concerns about stability. But what were you thinking, number one? And number two, what did you say to convince the other side to decide to move ahead with this? In a regulated
Thank you,
industry,
Richard.
this is
Yeah.
the largest insurance company, all
Well,
this.
You know, at that time, we were, of course, the leader in the life insurance industry here in the Philippines. And one of my strongest points was the quality of our workers, the knowledge of the English language, their hardworking, I guess, quality or virtue. I pointed this out to AIG. We were competing against India. Well, it started off with a long list. China was included, but eventually in the short list were the Philippines and India. Both the country manager of India, of AIG, and I lobbied with our CEO, Hank Greenberg, at that time. And I think, again, because Mr. Greenberg was aware of Filipinos' the quality of the managers, the hardworking quality of Filipino workers, etc., he opted for the Philippines. He had been coming to the Philippines since 1969, when he assumed CEO position of AIG. So he was quite familiar with the Philippines. And when I talk to senior executives of AIG, even now, they tell me that it was the right decision. Because quality-wise, AIG Shared Services has a very high, I'm not doing this as a, I'm just responding to your, not as a commercial for AIG Shared Services. I happen to sit in the board of AIG Shared Services, but they have a very high quality level. The business units in AIG that outsource are very happy with the performance of AIG Shared Service. And that's why I commend the management and the staff of AIG Shared Services, because they have proven what I have said, that one, quality is something that they will be very happy about. And I think the one of the things I can point out, when we had these floods, I don't know which one was that. We have a lot of floods. But there was one time where Manila roads were flooded and a lot of businesses had closed down. I understand in the case of AIG Shared Service, 80% of the workforce was able to go, despite all the problems. Some of them had to take boats and things like that just to be able to make it. But they got to the office, and AIG Shared Service management were very impressed, not just in the Philippines, but also in New York. Because these people defied all the odds, the challenges, and they just to be able to get to work. And then they stayed there. People actually slept there because they couldn't get back to their homes. So I am very proud of our people. And that's what I also point out to the American businesses. The quality of the Philippine worker is really very high. And you know, we can say that we can compete against any other country.
Absolutely. Please, a hand, ladies and gentlemen. A wonderful
Thank you.
story and wonderful career.
Thank you so much.